and welcome to the Open Ocean Pod. On this podcast, we welcome everyone to learn more about ocean science and the different career pathways into the field. We will be speaking with a variety of guests to gain some expertise and hear some insightful stories to motivate you to pursue your own passions. I believe that we can achieve greatness when people from all different backgrounds come together to share their knowledge. So that is why I've created this podcast as a platform for everyone to share their thoughts and hopefully make waves in the marine science industry. Thank you for joining us on the Open Ocean Pod, and I hope you enjoy today's episode.
Welcome, Natalie. Thank you so much for being here. And I'd like to start off this episode by asking you, what is your field and why did you choose it?
Thank you so much for having me. My field is marine biology, more specifically foraging behaviour. And the reason that I chose it, I've always been really interested by the ocean and felt really at home there. And I think how animals forage and eat is just really at the core of their general survival behaviour. So I've always been really interested in I think we've all seen those amazing hunting scenes on David Attenborough documentaries and things like that. So I basically work on that behavior, and I just find that to be, really exciting and quite relatable to a human, like how they're eating, what kind of food they're preferring. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Amazing. Thank you so much. And so also, I'd like you to introduce yourself a little bit more and tell us, in your own words, who are you and what do you do?
Sure. So I'm Natalie. I'm a third year PhD student at the British Antarctic Survey. And I'm also associated with the University of Southampton. So I'm funded on a PhD program called the Inspire DTP, which has now been relaunched as the Ignite DTP. I work on Antarctic whale foraging, like I just mentioned, and I specialize in understanding what kind of krill do whales like or make. So what kind of krill swarms do they like or make? So I'm really interested in the idea of whales herding krill up to the surface. And I'm also really interested in which krill swarms a whale might target. And when I've spoken to my friends about this, they generally say they've come up with this phrase, I like looking at a whale's favorite pasta shapes, because that's the way that they can kind of understand it. So if I'm working with very small children, that's kind of how I summarize it.
Nice. I like that. And so with working at BAS, can you tell us a bit more about how your day-to-day research goes? Like, is it very varied, or are you looking at sort of the same types of data sets? Like, what does it involve?
Sure. So working at BAS, it's a research institute, not a university. So already that brings it to be quite a different day to day than being at a university. So I don't really have any undergraduate or master students that I really mentor or do a lot with. I've actually started taking on a few recently, but I generally don't. And it's much more of a kind of 9 to 5, quite professional environment. In terms of my day to day, my actual PhD work is relatively similar day to day because I do a computational PhD, so I don't do a lot of lab work. I do some field work, which maybe we'll touch on a bit later. But yeah, my day to day is kind of coding in R and handling large data sets in terms of my PhD work. But then in terms of the kind of all the things that go around the PhD, I actually do a lot of different stuff. So I do now do some mentoring. I also tend to do quite a lot of outreach, doing schools visits and stuff like that. I go to seminars. There's a lot of cake eating involved. It seems like every social bonding activity centers around cake. So I have cake with my science team or with the students. I read a lot of papers. And I get to have fun meetings where I talk to people about whales and whale behavior, which is kind of the dream, honestly.
One thing I can kind of relate to at the minute is coding with R. So as an undergraduate, I think I've spoken to a few people about this, but like coming into it, knowing that I just love the ocean and I care about wildlife and all of that stuff, you don't really envisage, I don't know about you, but you don't really envisage sort of working like coding.
Yeah, totally.
But would you say that like progressing into it, it was quite intimidating, or would you say that it's like a really useful skill that you kind of just grow to love? Like, what is your sort of relationship with it, with coding?
So, I have always, to some extent, enjoyed coding, although I didn't come from a really heavy coding background or anything. So I didn't do a lot of computer science or coding in my undergrad, and I really only came to grapple with it more in my master's. But I have always found it to be quite intuitive. Um, I actually, maybe this might sound a bit random, but I'm a knitter and a crocheter. And the very first computer scientists, a lot of them were women. And basically, one of the reasons for that is that knitting and crochet patterns follow a very similar structure and language to coding. So things like
Interesting.
for loops are involved in knitting and crochet patterns. So maybe that's why it initially made a lot of sense to me. But I would say
Yeah.
for those people that really struggle to, I guess, fall in love with coding or enjoy coding, it's not really about the coding. It's about what the coding can do for you. So a bit like, written language, some people might not enjoy writing, but the things that you can communicate through writing can be really impactful. It's a similar thing. The insights that coding can give you into your data can be really impactful. And often the visualizations that you can make in R are something that you couldn't really get any other way. And the kind of ease and quickness with which you can look through your data in R once you start to get quite competent, there's not really anything else that can do that for you other than coding. So
Yeah.
I do know some undergrads that say, well, why can't I just use Excel? But yeah, once you start to get to grips with it, you can really reveal a lot about your data very rapidly, which I find exciting.
Yeah, that is really exciting. And like you said, it's kind of the use of it is it's not about well, it is a little bit about the journey of going through that data and using it, but it's more about the output, how that can affect your science,
I
communicate it
would
to other
also
people.
say that we've just entered like an awesome new time to be learning coding because of ChatGPT or other AI kind of Copilot. There's GitHub Copilot as well.
Yeah.
Because before then you would have to Google an error, and then you would have to try and find someone that had had the exact same error as you in the past, or you'd have to
Yeah.
try and cobble together from a few different errors. And now that you can put things into ChatGPT, it can be really, really helpful. And I use that a lot during my coding. And I would say that's not a sign that you're not coding well. That's just learning how to use tools effectively. So I had
Mm.
this huge chunk of code that wasn't working the other day, and I put it in ChatGPT, and I had a misplaced comma. The amount of time that would
Yeah.
have taken me to find, it's like not worth it. So
Yeah. Amazing. Yeah, and I kind of want to touch on developments in science a bit later as well. So we might come back to sort of using AI as a useful tool. But I kind of wanted to go back to sort of your progression into where you are now. And yeah, did you always know that you wanted to, research whales, or not even specifically whales, but just marine science?
so I had quite an unconventional entry into marine biology. And actually saying that, I think that's true of a lot of people. And I'd argue maybe there isn't even a conventional route, but maybe, yeah, I didn't have the route you might expect. So I was always really interested in marine world and in whales, but I also have a lot of other interests. And at the school that I went to, they were very encouraging of people pursuing medicine if they had good grades. And I had quite strong academic background kind of throughout school. So I actually went to study medicine. I studied medicine at Oxford for a year. And then I just, I really struggled with it, and I really struggled to engage with it. The way it was taught there was very kind of pure science and cell level stuff, which I've always been more interested in. at the least the organism, and if not the kind of whole ecosystem. So
Yeah.
I ended up kind of withdrawing from that course and reapplying to Oxford onto a different course. So I didn't transfer, I had to reapply, which was quite stressful.
Yeah.
And then I studied something which was a mixture of biology and social sciences, a subject called human sciences, which was pretty awesome. And then gradually I started to move back into biology. And so I did a master's as well in ecology at Imperial. And I think the reason that it took me so long to get there, despite the fact that I have always really loved marine biology and I have always really loved whales, is that I was told that that wasn't really a realistic career and that wasn't really something that someone did.
Yeah.
And I've been doing a lot of outreach recently and mentoring of students. And the thing that I try and repeat is that there is someone that has to do the dream job, and that person could be you. Sure, not everyone can be a whale scientist, but there is someone that has to be a whale scientist, and that job does exist. So
Yeah.
I think, yeah, I had always thought of it as being extremely unachievable and unrealistic. And now here I am. So yeah, a bit of a full circle type of moment. And I actually spoke to my supervisor about this the other day, but the real sign was that when I was studying for my medical school entrance exams, I had this crochet whale that I kept with me. That was kind of my mascot to keep going. And now I look back and I'm like, well, yeah, because I was really interested in whales and I wasn't as interested in medicine. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's easy to kind of see all the signs looking back. Yeah.
Yeah. I know with retrospect, it's like, yeah, of course I was interested in that. But I guess at the time, it's like you said with the mentoring, I guess some of your mentees are kind of hearing all of this advice from different people and they're like, well, I'm not really sure if it can be me. So yeah, this is like one of the main reasons for this podcast. And I'm so glad that you're coming and speaking about this because this is, we need like the encouragement from this community to yeah, like keep going
Yeah,
and chase your dreams.
absolutely. And I had a really great piece of advice the other day, which was don't take advice from people that aren't in your field. Like we
Mm.
all take a lot of advice from our parents and we hold our parents' opinions very highly. And that's not to say you shouldn't listen to your parents, but,
Yeah.
maybe consider that if you're really wanting to go into a specific field, the people in that field are the ones that are kind of best placed to let you know whether things are realistic or not. And I
Yeah.
put a lot of stock on teachers' advice. And they might not have ever met a marine biologist. So, fair enough, but we are out there.
Yeah, exactly. Like yeah, that's such a good piece of advice. I would really like to sort of reiterate that at the end. As a key takeaway. But the next sort of thing I wanted to move on to was with your outreach and like communications and yeah, science communication. Did you always know that you kind of wanted to do that, or were you always confident enough to do that, or has it been a sort of progression?
That's a great question. I think in terms of confidence, it's definitely, there's two parts to it, right? Which is definitely I do have some confidence because, for example, I come from quite a kind of a theatre kid type of background. I did a lot of kind of performing and stuff when I was growing up. So in that way, I did have that kind of confidence. And I used to teach like ballet to small kids and stuff. So, that aspect of things, um, public speaking and stuff wasn't necessarily the intimidating part. I would say the intimidating part, which I did struggle with for quite a while, is the idea that you are the goal. So presenting to someone and saying, this is how I got here, don't you want to do that too? And you're kind of thinking, oh, well, I'm not really all that. I'm not really all that great. And so I definitely struggled with that aspect of confidence for a long time. And things like feeling that I didn't look how a marine biologist should look, or I didn't look outdoorsy enough, or I liked pink too much and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But then I started to realize that for there to be people that I related to in the field, maybe I needed to be that person. So
Right.
that's kind of how I got into doing a bit more outreach and a bit more science communication. Yeah. And I don't have pink hair right now, but I had pink hair as of a few weeks ago. And
Yeah.
I went to a school and a kid said to me, I didn't know that a scientist could have pink hair. And that made me feel like, okay, this is actually working. Like, this is making a bit of an
Yeah.
impression. So yeah, definitely
Yeah.
gaining in confidence on the outreach.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that's so nice to hear. If you don't see something in your field, in the place that you want to be, like actually taking on that role for yourself, and sort of being that for other people, that's really inspiring. Um, so I kind of wanted to go again back to kind of jumping around here, your PhD program placement. So how did that sort of have an impact on you going abroad and yeah, having that experience?
Sure. So I've been on a long journey of confidence building, and
Yeah.
that's definitely been a part of it. So I'll just explain a little bit about the placement itself, first of all, which is that my PhD program will fund you basically to go to another research institute or lab, and you can do up to 3 months there. So this summer, summer 2024, I did a placement at Oregon State University in a really cool whale lab called the GEM Lab. And that was kind of an amazing experience all round. And I know that you've seen me talk about my work that I did there before, but just to really focus on the question,
Yeah.
in terms of how it made me change or feel how that experience was, that was also a bit of a lesson in building confidence. I think as British people, we can be quite self-deprecating. And definitely I wouldn't ever want to be seen to be bragging about my accomplishments. And I've been very quite conscious of that. And then in the US, it's like quite a different atmosphere to that. So people are kind of telling you both how great they are, but also how great you are. So it was uplifting everyone. But yeah, they really want to talk about their accomplishments, and they really feel proud of the work that they've done openly, which is quite different
Yeah.
from the UK culture. And I tried to take a bit of that away when I came back to the UK to try and talk more openly about things that I was proud of and be a bit less, I guess, kind of stiff upper lip. And in a similar vein, they were really joyful about their work as well. And I think, you know, working, especially here at BAS, everyone's doing cool work. We don't really talk often about how cool our work is. We don't reflect on how cool our work is. Whereas in the US, they were all talking about how awesome their work was really
Yeah.
often. And yeah, I found that to be quite inspiring. And I've tried to bring a little bit of that home with me, although I am quite British, so I do still struggle with it at times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. Like that sentiment. It's infectious as well. The inspiration that you sort of bring to others, you represent that. People sort of want to reflect it as well. Um, which is, yeah, so great.
Definitely.
So if we could just dive a little bit more into your day-to-day collecting the data and processing the data during your placement, what was that process like?
Sure. So the data came from these hydrophone tags that were on the back of the grey whales. And basically, I listened to all of those tag recordings. So it amounted to probably around 30 hours of tag recordings. And in those tag recordings, I'd try and work out what a specific sound might be. So I'd listen to the sound. It's quite a meticulous, kind of involved process. So listen to the sound, then often look at the accelerometry for the sound to see what the whale might be doing at that point. And then also look at the video for the sound to, again, kind of try and understand something about the whale's behavior. And then from that, for each sound, I try and kind of label what I think it might be. So maybe it's a weather sound, like high wind, or maybe it's like a foraging sound, like the grey whale is snuffling in the kind of sediment, or there were some grey whale calls, some killer whale calls, and also quite a lot of vessel noise. And basically, yeah, I'd go through and annotate each of those. Yeah, it was quite like a pilot study. So these hydrophones hadn't been used for that purpose before. So I was really trying to work out if we could even hear anything on the tags, and luckily we could. And yeah, we were basically trying to see if the whale had a behavioral response to these different noises, and whether they had a behavioral response to the vessel noise, and also whether we could in some way try and quantify the amount of vessel noise that they were experiencing. So the loudness and the duration, because these animals, they're living in the nearshore environment, so very close to ports and kind of active fishing areas, generally recreational fishery, but those vessels can still be a little bit loud. And so we're just trying to understand how much they're exposed to that and what their response might be, as well as understanding their response to some other ocean noises too, or what those ocean noises might represent in terms of behavior.
Amazing. So you basically took like all sorts of different data, visual, auditory, and obviously the accelerometry data to create a sort of a world, like a day in the life of grey whale in a
Yeah,
sense. Is
that's
that right?
exactly it. Yeah, and that aspect was actually really incredible, because I think we talked a little bit before about coding and that not really being what you imagine in terms of a marine
Yeah.
biologist. And I definitely have grown to love my coding, and I'm pretty passionate about stats actually. But this was very different from my PhD work. So my PhD work, the whales are just points. You
Yeah.
know, it's like you saw a whale at this angle, at this distance, whereas this was really listening to the whale's world. And so I felt
Wow.
quite a big emotional connection to the animals.
Yeah.
And definitely in the lab as well, people also felt similarly. So I might play a call for them and I'd say, you know, that was Pac-Man.
Mhm.
And everyone in the lab would know which whale that is, and they'd be really excited to
Yeah.
hear it. So that level of emotional connection was something that was really different and quite exciting for me.
Yeah, that's so cool as well, because you really feel like the data that you're collecting and the questions you're trying to answer, I presume it's like it means a lot more because you know exactly how they're being impacted and like which one, who is experiencing this. And yeah, that's really amazing to hear.
Yeah, and it definitely brings its challenges as well, because I didn't experience it while I was there, but people in the lab have obviously known animals that have then died, sometimes through things like ship strike. And so
Yeah,
that's where you really have to balance that passion and that emotional connection with a
right.
kind of detachment, right? Like wild animals do have hazardous lives.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, you just can't ever get too attached. So there's really a balance to be had there, which I think could be quite difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely a balance. I wanted to talk a little bit more about your field work. Obviously, within this PhD, you've had this amazing opportunity abroad, and then last year you mentioned that you had an Antarctic fieldwork project. So,
Mhm.
yeah, if you could explain a little bit more about what that involves.
Sure. So I was really lucky to be invited onto a fieldwork project being run by someone at Southampton, actually.
Okay.
So my supervisor at Southampton was running a project looking at krill and fin whales, which is quite similar to what my PhD works on. And yeah, I got to go to the Antarctic Peninsula on a small vessel. And then we ran transects, and we also looked for whales with binoculars. And we got some sonar data about the krill as well, using something called active acoustics. Um, yeah, and it was an awesome experience. I don't know if you have any other questions about it.
Yeah, a little bit more about the active acoustics. How does that work? Sort of what are you using a particular type of machinery? Like, yeah, how does that work?
Yeah, so we use something called an echo sounder.
Okay.
And on this particular vessel, there wasn't an echo sounder fitted. So we used something called a pole mount, which is like basically a big pole with the echo sounder on the bottom, to make sure that it's kind of immersed in the water. And then that sends out we call it a ping, at a particular frequency of sound. And sometimes people use several different frequencies. So we were using 2 frequencies. And basically, it's like with any other echolocation, you time the length of time between you sending out the ping and the ping coming back to you. And then from that, you're able to understand where objects are in the water. So a krill swarm might be very dense, and then it would reflect at least some proportion of that sound back. And then you can kind of see that there's a krill swarm. And most of this maths is done by the echo sounder and the echo sounder software. So we just get out nice images that show us where the krill swarms are, which is very helpful, although there is lots of complex processing to be done once we get back from the field. But in the field, at least we get to see, oh, there's a krill. There's a layer of something, and often we might have to assume what it is, but there's a layer of something sitting at, say, 100 meters. And then we're hoping to align that with where we see the whales so that we can understand if the whales are feeding on that krill.
Oh, amazing. Amazing. So you're really building like an underwater map, I guess.
We have to calibrate the echo sounder, so that basically considers variables that would affect the speed of sound. So things like the salinity and the temperature of the water might affect the speed that a sound wave travels through. And so we do calibration. Calibration can be a little bit fiddly. So we hang special metal spheres underneath the echo sounder. And we know the exact dimensions of them, and we have to hang them with a little fishing line. And it can be quite difficult. So we do that before we do our survey. In terms of kind of most of the other variables, we would account for those later, often using big statistical models like generalized additive models, GAMs. So yeah, we just do that calibration and then we collect the data. But in general, in science, our principle is collect as much data as possible, even if you don't think it will be useful, because there are some crazy stats that can really fix a lot of problems for you.
Wow. Okay. That's so interesting as well. Yeah, like again, as an undergraduate, you kind of it's hard to imagine like actually practically how these statistical models are going to be used sort of in practice. Like you're thinking, oh, as a marine biologist, when am I going to use this stuff? So yeah, having something practical to sort of align this with is really valuable. So yeah, I kind of would like to move on to a bigger question, sort of zoom out. We've gone through your field work and your projects abroad. Would you say that there is anything in particular that would be, if you had no sort of monetary limits or anything like that, what would be the main thing to sort of push your field forwards? I know we've touched on sort of AI and technology in that way. Is there anything that you can think of?
Yeah, this is a really tricky question for sure. I think there are a lot of people doing really valuable projects obviously in our field. So not wishing to bash any of those projects at all. I think where my kind of heart and passion lie are generally in large data sets or bringing lots of data sets together. And I think as we have increasing statistical power at our fingers, increasing computing power at our fingers, that's something that can become more and more possible. But we definitely struggle with some issues of, I guess, trust, because it can be really difficult to open up your data and share it with others if you don't know what the outcome is going to be. So I think that's that's kind of limited our ability to use really big data sets in the past, or just not understanding how it might be useful to someone else. So I would really like to see particularly data that's already been used and maybe a paper's gone out about it. I would love to see that data being made available in some way. Yeah, I think it can be quite challenging to find the right data for your project if you want to do a really big data project. I think we're also seeing, I mean, we've massively seen drones take off. That's not supposed to be fun. Drones take off in the last sort of 10 years or so, as they've become kind of increasingly less expensive. And I find it really hard to imagine, but I'm sure that it's true, that there's going to be other similar technologies that are really going to kind of blow our field wide open. So maybe a little bit of a dull answer, big data and new technologies. But yeah, that's where I see our field going.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, like with the drone data, I remember in your sort of previous discussion about your work in Oregon, they had this shot, for anyone who's listening, it was like this overview shot of a hydrophone like going onto the back of the whale. And that for me was like, wow, like the possibilities are pretty exciting. If you could
Yeah,
go,
absolutely. So
apply
Bay
that.
saw me give a talk where I just showed a little video of a drone flying over a whale about 3 meters above, and then they dropped a suction cup tag which had a hydrophone on it from the drone onto the back of the whale. And it's a very neat and non-invasive, or even less invasive way of being able to tag animals. And I think drones in general, obviously having that overhead view really gives you a lot more insight into animals' behavior, because when you're looking at whales from the side, I guess, from the same plane, it can be really hard to know what they're up to. So I think kind of drones, remote monitoring as well. So having cameras or hydrophones that you can go back and collect have really changed how we do science. I'm just excited to see what new technology comes out, really.
Nice, nice. I also wanted to briefly touch on the importance of sort of reusing experiments and like making sure that the data that you are collecting, your method is repeatable. Because like you said, there is so much data out there, but it might not be shared properly, or it might just not be very accessible to other scientists. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's definitely a massive challenge. So, I have tended to work with big data sets through my PhD and the rest of my research, and their quality does vary quite widely. So sometimes you have really great data sets that have been collected very scientifically, but they might just not have the right documentation with them. And I do get it, because writing documentation can be quite dull. But things like columns being named, and then you don't know whether it's in meters or in feet that they've put the measurement, or we've had some issues before with date formatting, where some people have formatted date the American way and some the British or European way. And then you end up with 1/10/2024. Well, is that the 1st of October, or is that the 10th of January? And those things, those documentation can only be made when the data is being collected, and there's something that we can't go back and get later.
Right.
So that's something that I'm really passionate about trying to change, or really bring into the consciousness. And I think it's something that we all are maybe aware of as scientists, but we're not thinking about it super thoroughly when we're collecting that data. So yeah, very important documentation.
Yeah, admin.
Admin, indeed. All those forms, they're for a reason.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah, it's for the greater good, for making sure that this information is able to be passed on correctly and be useful to people.
Exactly. And you never know what someone else might be able to do with your data.
Yeah, yeah, it's quite exciting. So I guess to sort of round up this episode, um, I would like to sort of go back to this amazing advice of, um, yeah, don't take advice from people not in your field necessarily. Um, and if you could say to your younger self, any piece of advice, what do you think it would be?
Well, there are quite a few things that I wish my younger self had done differently, which I'm sure is true for many people. Definitely, yeah, not taking advice from people not in your field would be a really important one, which I think we've kind of already gone over. And similarly, that dream jobs do exist,
Mhm.
and sure, they might involve more form filling out and more coding than you would expect, but there is someone that is um, often doing that job that you dream of, even if the reality of the job might not be exactly what you think. Um, I think the other thing that's really important is trying to find the really good mentors and the people that are really supportive in your field. And often they're not too hard to find in terms of figuring out who it is. And those people have often built really incredible positive communities around them. So, the GEM Lab in Oregon would be a really fantastic example. That's led by a really inspiring supervisor called Lee Torres. And she's built such a positive and supportive community around her at that lab. Um, but it can really be true in lots of ways. And I think, yeah, when you're looking for supervisors, you just want to look for people that others speak highly of, because often, yeah, the people that they have around them will also be similar. And
Yeah,
yeah, I guess last of all, if you can't find that person, maybe try and be that person.
yeah,
If you can't find the person that ticks every single one of the boxes that you might want to be ticked, maybe that's something that you can do. And um,
yeah,
that's something that I've really been trying to do in my work, is um, try and be that figure for others, although I do have loads of positive role models also around me.
yeah. Yeah, that's great advice. And do you think also if you kind of envisage like a perfect mentor in your field, or like what kind of qualities that they might have, sort of embodying those anyway is probably a good step towards creating like your own like self-confidence and creating opportunities for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I think when we judge ourselves as scientists or in whatever field we're in, I think we use often the kind of stereotypical measures like, oh, how many papers have I published? How much funding have I secured? Um, how productive have I been? But then actually, when you're looking for role models, that's often not what you're interested in. You might be interested in stuff like how impactful their research is, but you'd also be interested in, do they treat their colleagues with respect? Do they, do they ask really good questions? Are they a really kind researcher? Have they come up with this really off the walls project that you find really interesting? And so I think it's good to try and then, yeah, judge yourself by those metrics, not the kind of stereotypical scientist metrics, which can be a
Yeah.
little bit outdated and, um, yeah, not
Yeah.
that aspirational. I'm not sure.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I think it can be a bit like hard to relate to because coming from an undergraduate perspective, like you're not really at that stage where you can say, "Oh yeah, I've got all of these like accolades that I've achieved." So you sort of have to judge yourself by a different measuring stick, if that makes sense. Um, yeah, that's great advice.
Thank you.
And finally, I'd like to ask, what is your favorite species and why?
So I was warned of this question and I still don't have a good answer. Um, Definitely would have to be a cetacean.
Okay,
But I have a few candidates. I have a massive soft spot for beluga. Um,
okay.
that's mostly because I have a teddy that is a beluga that I sleep with every single night.
Okay.
And her name is Belinda. Um,
Oh,
But also I really relate to their echo sounding abilities because I spend so much time analysing echo sounder data. So I like the idea that there's a little whale out there that's doing the same thing as I am and just trying to find fish, because that's often what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I also love orca. I love the kind of cultural aspect of them. So yeah, in my undergrad, I studied, as I said, some social sciences, and I was particularly interested in anthropology. And I love learning about animals that are smart. And I think that the orca have really captured our imagination in terms of how animals might behave. Things like the way that they mourn their young, that kind of salmon hat craze that they had going on a little while ago, the attacking yachts, all those kind of things I think really change how we think of animals as being so different from ourselves.
Yeah.
And I just got one more, if that's okay, if I'm allowed three.
Yeah, of course.
My last would be a humpback, and they're very much the stereotypical whale. But I do find them insanely cool. I work on them for my PhD. I find the fact that they are sustained by krill, which is so small, I find that absolutely incredible. And I love their bubble net feeding as well, which is like tool use in cetaceans, which again, I think that really changes our perception of the intelligence of animals, you know, and particularly marine animals can be a lot smarter than we give them credit for.
Yeah, definitely. Well, that was an amazing answer. I
Thank you.
absolutely don't blame you for choosing three. Okay, so are there any other things that you sort of want to get out there to our audience of sort of aspiring biologists and marine biologists? Are there any plugs that you can sort of share?
Sure, I do have a plug. Thank you for setting me up so nicely. So, like I was talking about earlier, about sometimes feeling like I don't fit into the mold of a kind of outdoorsy field biologist. I actually have an Instagram called The Colourful Biologist, colourful spelt with a U, the British way. And on there, I'm trying to build a bit of a community, showing that scientists don't always look the way that you expect, and it's okay to, you know, wear really colourful clothes and be feminine and things like that in biology. But in general, I'm just trying to share like days in the life and some kind of small what it's like being a scientist kind of content on there. But it's very small, and I've not posted too much yet. But yeah, if you're interested in learning more about me, you can definitely head over to Instagram to The Colourful Biologist.
Thank you so much for coming on. You've had some amazing insights, not just academically and sort of career-wise, but just personal development as well. Yeah, you've been an amazing guest. Thank you.
Thanks, Faye. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for joining us on the Open Ocean Pod today. Make sure to leave a like or comment if you enjoyed. And don't forget to check out our Instagram or LinkedIn pages for any updates, and if you have any requests or feedback, we'd love to hear it. Listen on YouTube or Spotify next week for another insightful episode. See you next time.